I've taken that step and done that. So thank you for that. Okay, well, now that that's the opening act. Anyway, welcome to Peter White Public Library. My name is Marty Ackitts. I think I know everybody here for the most part. But I'm saying this for the people in YouTube land who are joining us. So welcome to Peter White Public Library. I'm just going to make you aware of a few things that are upcoming this month and next month. So next Monday, since you're all poetry fans, I'm assuming, since you're here, we have a wonderful reading by Russell Thorburn, accompanied with by Dylan Trost and Patrick Booth, doing some musical accompaniment as well. So it's next Monday, October 27th, 6:30 p.m. Russ is going to be reading selections from his new book. And then next month, we do have Kathleen Heidemann, who's going to be doing our Writers on Writing. I got to look at these dates because I can't remember them. Writers on Writing is going to be on Monday, November 10th at 6 p.m. Upstairs in the Shiras room, and she's going to be focusing on nature poetry. So that should be really wonderful, and we have a couple of other readings next month as well. Claudia Drozen, I know she doesn't want me to announce this, but I'm still going to announce it. Her book launch reading is November 6th, 6:30 p.m. right here in the community room. It's a wonderful, wonderful book called Brooklyn Accent. And the reason that she doesn't want me to announce it is because I think she's really nervous about all the people that are going to show up. But everybody in Marquette knows and loves Claudia are going to show up and support her. And then on the 13th at 6:30 p.m., we have the NMU Visiting Writer Series, and our very own Jonathan Johnson, who is in the audience, is going to be reading from his new collection of poems, Pine, and his new collection of short stories, The Little Lights of Town. So lots of other great stuff happening. I really encourage you to pick up one of our flyers for October and November so you can take it home, write it on your calendar or your hand, and don't forget. So I'm going to do just a little introduction. There's like 5 pages of biography on Keith, which I'm not going to go through all of it, but I do love his opening on his biography, which I will read and hit a couple other highlights. So Keith was born in British Columbia. I won't give the year out. So British Columbia, and he spent his childhood in Alberta and his adolescence in Indiana. And then after several years of moving around, he came to Michigan, where he earned a master's in English at Central Michigan University. And I love this list. I love this list of jobs. Okay, here we go. And I've done this too. So he has worked as a camp boy for a hunting outfitter in the Yukon, dishwasher in southern France, a house painter in Indiana and Ireland, a freight handler, a teacher, a freelance writer, the co-host of a radio talk show, and as the night attendant at a pinball arcade in California, which is, I think, my favorite out of that whole list. And for more than 20 years, he worked as a bookseller in Ann Arbor. And then he taught also in the undergraduate and graduate creative writing programs at the University of Michigan and directed the Bear River Writers Conference. So that's a few of the things. I could go through all of his publications, but I'm not going to because it's huge and you want to hear him and not me. But I do find this really kind of, you've made it when this happens. In 2018, the Keith Taylor Poetry Prize was endowed as a new Hopwood Award at the University of Michigan. So that's, you've made it when they name a poetry prize after you. And I'm going to close out. We had a wonderful workshop this afternoon at 12 noon. And I did write something, Keith, following your... So I'm going to read the poem, and I'm going to dedicate it to you. So this is called the Louis F. Taccolini Hand-Carved Birds Collection, Peter White Public Library for Keith Taylor, October 22nd. They sit outside this library meeting room named after a man who pioneered outdoor photography for the likes of National Geographic, their carved feathers delicate as birch bark. As with any living or once living thing, they are imperfect as stones on the shores of Lake Superior, gloriously imperfect, Leonard Cohen, imperfect, a voice cut by razors wrapped around words that split my heart open. The man who took logs and made this flock could be a god. Think about it. In Genesis, Yahweh speaks nothing into something, into light and earth and mud and fur and thigh and love. This log god, though, he did something more miraculous. He made trees fly. Please welcome Keith Taylor to Peter White.
Thank you, guys. I would probably prefer to have a handheld mic and be walking around, but then that would make it very difficult for them to do that. So I won't do that. I can see the clock back there, so I can hide my phone. Although Jenny Burtman says hi. Got to start my water here, because that will be important, if I can get it out. This is an odd podium, Marty.
I know, it's a weird, I should have just poured you the cup.
It's okay, I can deal.
Okay.
So thanks for being here. I'm always surprised when I come up to these towns in the UP by how many people I know. You know, it's like, okay, I'm not going to bring in the people that the locals are going to bring in, but you know, it's fun to see people I know, which is great. You have to indulge me here. I've been doing my readings this year, and I am starting with a couple of things to make myself feel good about myself, and just to remind you that things are not always what they seem. I have been a proud Michigan writer for over 50 years now, but I am not an American citizen. I am an immigrant. I live here on a green card, pay my taxes, yes, do not vote. We did have a draft card back in the day. So I want to read you just a couple things about my life as an immigrant, which is different than some of the immigration stories you will hear, but nonetheless. Landed immigrants. No, nothing like your huddled masses with exotic old world diseases. No endless weeks aboard ship sailing to a vague Eden. Just a rust-brown 58 Chevrolet pulling a family of 4 and a U-Haul southeast from Moose Jaw into this foreign land on July 4th. Main Street in Portal, North Dakota was blocked off early. Bunting and flags were already up. By Fargo, the bands were out. Between floats, Indians rode their nervous Appaloosas, always never looked down and always ignored the police who held us up, our motor running until the Minutemen with their pipes marched past and Yankee Doodle was lost in the sudden breeze. Then the car broke down. Steam sprayed out the grill, even seeped back through the floorboards. The gears locked. In Chicago, our future seemed an impossible dream, a new television show with machine guns and barrels of illegal whiskey brought from Canada. Chicago, where good guys looked bad and where the gangsters finally bought it. And this other one, which was in a chapbook, but I never put it in a big book. I probably should at some point now that I'm thinking about it. In Detroit, on Jefferson Avenue on the east side, on our way up to Grosse Pointe, there was an application support center. I suspect it's closed now and will not reopen, even if the government does, but we used to always have to go there, and it was a very weird experience for me. I went in this building, and there's probably a reason for what happened, but I walk in the building, and there are the people at the front, and over on the right side, there are crowds of people, mostly women wearing hijabs, mostly women with 2 or 3 children. I walk in, and they say, "Sir, just go over here." I walk into a room where there are 4 people waiting on me, and only me. I'm in and out of there in 5 minutes. So, you know, there's probably a good reason for it, but the optics were just terrible. You want to get through the immigration support center? Be an old white guy. That'll do it. So, anyway, here's the poem about that place. Immigration, application support center. Some words green card, rise from the chaos of Croatian and Chinese, from the wail of Russian babies, and resident alien from the Iraqi cab driver tutored by the Korean mother of three who helps him carve the strange shapes of this foreign alphabet onto his impenetrable forms, writing the tiny language we, the stateless, share in this room without decoration or irony. None of us feels we belong. So that's out of the way. I won't subject you to any more of that. Well, maybe I will. Who knows? I've been my most recent book called "What Can the Matter Be?" The book that Jenny and John are selling back there was a Michigan Notable Book of the Year for 2025. So I've done a lot of readings from that book. This reading that Marty set up is not actually part of that program. So I don't have to read exclusively from that book, although I will start reading from that book. But it's kind of a relief. I'm going to read tonight, once I get through this first little mini set, I'm going to read a bunch of new poems, 5 or 6 new poems, all of them very short, but that I've never read in public before because I've had to read from this other thing. So it's kind of fun to have these new poems to read. So the book is called What Can the Matter Be? Probably most of you know where that title comes from. Younger ones may not. Jenny and John, do you know where that title comes from? It's okay, you can say no. Nobody of your generation does, okay? The rest of the people here could probably sing the song with me. Oh dear, what can the matter be? Oh dear, what can the matter be? Oh dear, what can the matter be? Johnny's too long at the fair. The second verse nobody knows. He promised to buy me a bunch of blue ribbons. He promised to buy me a bunch of blue ribbon. He promised to buy me a bunch of blue ribbon to tie up my bonny brown hair. So I just thought it was one of those songs that everybody knew. But I guess it's everybody below a certain age knows that song. And I discovered that. There were a couple of classes that were teaching this book at U of M, and I went in there, and none of the students knew it, and only one of the professors knew it. I go, what? I thought everybody knew it. Like, hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle. I also thought it was that kind of tradition that it went back to the 12th or 11th century. But no, it was written in 1770, probably by one person, and it was a London music hall song, and it probably came to this country by those young men in red coats who came over to spank some people who didn't want to pay their taxes. But it's here. And for a long time, everybody knew it. That seems to have changed, but that's okay. So I wonder, the people who were teaching this book, nobody knew the song, and the title of the first poem, the title of the title poem, is Johnny's Too Long at the Fair. And I was wondering, what the hell did they think that title meant? If I didn't know that song, I wouldn't know what that title meant, and I spend my life reading poetry. But Johnny's Too Long at the Fair. I should also say that this book begins in a rather gloomy way, and we'll get past that at the end of this reading, but in COVID time, and this was my first COVID poem. Johnny's Too Long at the Fair. Oh dear, what can the matter be? I haven't been outside in months. From the window I watch chipmunks piling up dirt from the holes they've dug through the yard. At night I see the shadows of foxes and coyotes slink into the back lot. Raccoons growl and howl outside my door. Oh dear, what can the matter be? I haven't seen any cars on the street for days, just thin young people running, wearing bright, tight clothes, hats pulled down to their eyebrows, and masks up past their noses. Oh dear, what can the matter be? My neighbor left a note on the door saying people are marching on Main Street, carrying signs and dancing across the yellow lines. I keep watching my window, but they haven't come by here yet. Oh dear, what can the matter be? So yeah, I mean, if you're doing a book, people will tell you to do books, don't start gloomy. Well, I'm starting gloomy. Now, hopefully I get to a place that gets much happier. It just dawned on me that John and Jenny know the people that last poem was dealt with. So when I get there, we'll have our moment of ecstasy. But as some of you will remember, maybe some of you, particularly up here, weren't as obsessed by this as some of us down south. But everything, even very simple things, became ominous. Like I can't go to the grocery store without my hand cleaner. It's like we were scared of very simple things. This is called When the Beast Passes Through. Woke to snow light to our last significant snow on a quiet day, in a time of quiet days, and tracks in the snow up from the avenue, fresh tracks, very fresh, canid tracks, but no dog walks like this in a straight line, 1 foot directly before the last, up and out towards our neighbors. And, then you start thinking about, you get these reports of bad things happening in the natural world, and those get inflated. So despite what this poem says, I want to reassure you that monarch butterflies are not extinct. The eastern population has gone up and down a lot. This year seemed to have been an okay kind of year. And this is the migrating population, over 3 generations they go to Mexico and come back. So our population was troubled, and it might still be troubled. We don't know. But monarch butterflies have been introduced all over the world. I've seen monarch butterflies in Uruguay. I've seen them in Hawaii. I've seen them in France. So, we don't have to worry about the species, but perhaps our particular subspecies we do. The last monarch. Suddenly, there was a summer without monarchs. I'd seen monarchs clustered in small trees on the north shores of large lakes, waiting for a night breeze to carry them across. So many butterflies on one tree that it bent almost to the ground. And then a summer without monarchs. And I had walked one September beside another lake littered with the broken orange wings of monarchs caught in storms trying to cross. And just the October before, I'd seen one monarch lonely on a baseball field flying south. But still, suddenly, one summer without monarchs, and then the fall. And again, those simple things that seem to get very weighty. This is, for those of you who write poems, by the way, this is one of those poems where the title changes everything. And the title is At the End of Empire. My love leans back in her garden chair, smiling. She's looking up things on her phone, the names of pests or planting instructions for early summer. She might be finishing the Times crossword puzzle. First there's birdsong, then sirens squawk from the streets around her. A squirrel sneaks over and sleeps for a moment in the shade she casts. So now some new poems, and some of them are going to take me in, connect me with some older poems that I will do. So. Since my wife was there, I wasn't going to read this, but I'll read this one. An anniversary poem from far away. I know people who ache to be away from home, gone to far places, who feel alive only if climbing the walls at Rhodes or watching puffins fly off the islands in Maine. But you, my love, have given life a flavor that stays with me when I travel to Greece or Maine, that makes me long for our kitchen where I could make coffee and wash yesterday's dishes. That connects me to an old, we have now been together for 48 years, and that poem was drafted early and now comes back in this time. But here's the poem I wrote for our 20th wedding anniversary, which is now a lifetime ago. It's called After 20 Years for Christine. We sat above the rocks below Big Sur one spring morning and watched snowy egrets dance, their breeding plumes arching backward as they raised their yellow feet hesitantly from the surf before he mounted her and egret generations began their tentative futures. Our kinship with snowy egrets was nothing grand. Perhaps we understood their single-mindedness and hoped they felt some kind of pleasure too. It looked as if they did. That list of jobs that Marty read through, I have to admit that I'm being a little bit, I was going to say bitchy, but that's not right. But as many of you who follow contemporary writing know, we are in a time period where all the biographies of writers on the backs of their books sound the same. Went to school here, won this prize, published there, and now teaches there. That's it. And I could do that, but I didn't want to. I wanted to go through all that list, which is a very kind of 1930s macho thing to do, all the things I did to be manly. But nonetheless, I thought it was kind of fun, so I did it. Some people know me as a Michigan nature writer, and there'll be more about that, so I should do at least a few poems about the natural world, or I wouldn't live up to my expectations. When we came over the bridge, saw a couple common terns, because that's one of the best places in Michigan to see common terns. Going under. Then the bird who intends it, who dives straight down, head first, disappearing altogether in the watery world below him. Turn, falling, aware or not of suffering, how can we ever know? Straight from flight to dive to swim, before exploding upward, sexual and fertile, shaking off water on the wing, returned with something silver in his bill. I have a bunch of poems about the birds I see in my backyard. I live right in town, center of Ann Arbor, which can feel very urban, as several of you know. But I've lived there for 40 years now, so I have seen 118 species of birds in or over my backyard. And now, since we have white-tailed deer regularly, which is a fairly new phenomenon, that close to the center of town, I'm up to, I think, 14 species of mammal. So this is kind of cool. That's only because I just sit there and look out the window, right, which is the best thing to do. So here's another one of my backyard poems. This is called Implacable. It has an epigraph from the poet Robinson Jeffers from a poem of his called Hurt Hawks. The old implacable arrogance is the epigraph. Hurt Hawks is the poem where Robinson Jeffers alienated lots of people. It's the one that has the line, "I'd sooner accept the penalties, kill a man than a hawk." And I know lots of people who might share that sentiment. Except for the penalties, the fact that I'd be executed, I'd rather kill a man than a hawk. So he said it in the poem that I'm quoting here, the old implacable arrogance about the hawks. I'm not saying I approve of that statement, by the way, but I sort of understand it, so for what it is. Implacable. Squirrels scatter when the red-tailed hawk flies in from the neighbor's birch to the black oak outside my study window. Finches and juncos hide in brush piles, but her yellow eyes look past the minor politics of small birds. She sees me, backlit, looking out at her, but she doesn't care. Even when she ruffles her soft breast feathers and preens, she displays sharp places, her curved, flesh-ripping beak, the terrible talons ready to impale, that she lifts to scratch gently the underside of her wings. Oh, I guaranteed Marty that I would not reread poems today. Here's one that I've never read in public only because I'm not sure I could get through it. It's a tiny little poem, but I think now I can. We'll try. One of the horrors of aging, as probably several of you know, is that you can get very sentimental. So I got all kinds of poems, even some poems that I think are really pretty good, that I can't read because I wouldn't make it through. My buddy Allison Swan, when she's with me and at readings, she will take over for me on certain poems. So this one, I'll try to read for the first time in public. It's called Irises in California. When I wanted to smoke, I would step outside the house in Southern California where my mother lay dying. In the backyard there in early April, purple irises strained to open. When their petals finally pulled apart, I could clearly hear the puff of their faint exhalations. Here's one. Again, I know there's a lot of writers here, and my advice is never throw anything away. This is a poem I first drafted in July of 1972. Yes, that's a long time ago. And I totally forgot it, but I was looking up one of my Baudelaire books to find a poem, and I found this in faint handwriting, this poem written in the back. And I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. Now, it's heavily revised. In those 53 years, I have changed it, but it's the only big city I've ever lived in was Paris, and as you might expect, I was penniless in Paris. When I came back from France, I weighed 127 pounds. As you can tell, I no longer weigh 127 pounds. Ozempic has helped, though. I'm no longer twice the man I was when I came back from France, and I was for a while. So here's this poem that has that lineage, and it's called Preparing to Leave. In shadows or through stains of heavy sun, pigeons pick their evening meal. A child fills her jar with stones, then brushes past the bench where someone watches. Shadows move away, light grows through the arcade. The child empties her jar. So that was a poem I resurrected. My friend Steve, sitting back there, and some other people you might know, Jim Daniels and Lee Upton and a bunch of other people. In the 1980s, we did a kind of what later would become an email group, but it wasn't email. So we got poems once a month, and we put a packet together, and we sent them out to 10 people or so in the group. And friend Mark Sheehan recently found all those packets of poems and digitized them for us. And I read, most of the poems I'm kind of glad I'd forgotten about. There were 2 or 3 poems that, were okay. And then there were 3 that I said, wow, these are really cool poems. I like these poems. Pretty much they all had to be revised. They were 35 years old. But here's one, which I'm going to read it because at the Marquette, Michigan Arts Day in 2022, I think, or maybe it was 23, or maybe it was 24, 23, I think. This poem was put on a small broadside that was pasted all over town, I'm told. So, this was my Marquette poem. And the roots of this poem are that old. It's called Three Springs. Up where forests have pushed back through fences, belief comes more easily, comes sometimes for us despite our learning, even as it comes for that man we both love. Remember the day he took us away from the lake, from the roads, far into a valley, fern-covered and filled with the high calls of warblers ready to mate? Remember, and this might help you, when, shaking, you stand outlined before our window, drawing from its blank chill what comfort you can against the fear mounting at night. He showed us the stream overgrown in watercress, kept fresh, he assured us, even in the heart of the harshest winter, by the 3 springs he led us to, water rising, unbidden, always rising, spreading in an arc of green. Remember, and this might help you as it helps that man, our friend, who knows more than I know of fear's hard presence. Remember this, we pushed our hands into them, down through water and sand, until we could bury our shoulders in that pulse of cold water. A theme that I come back to in this book, where this book gets, when the gloominess of COVID gets resolved, and it was in a previous book of mine called The Birdwhile in 2017, is the simple fact, not original with me by any means, but the idea that we receive grace from the natural world. Grace, and I'm not a very religious person, but grace in the Christian meaning of that word. It is unmerited, we don't deserve it, but we get it anyway. And one of the great examples of that, of course, is fresh water. And our food, too. So I'll read you a poem about the food in a minute. But here's another one. This is a place that probably most of you know, Kitchity-Keepy, down there by south. What's the name of that town down there? Manistee. Yes, Manistee. Thank you very much. That's it. If you haven't visited, you should go. It's a kind of wonderful place. And it's filled with tourists, and they made it easy for tourists. So you have to look past the tourists. I used to take my students from the biological station there, and sometimes I suppose they wondered why, but I was trying to convince them without actually preaching at them. So the numbers at Kitchity-Keepy. Kitchity-Keepy means big spring, I think. It's also known as something about the moon is in there, but the numbers at Kitchity-Keepy. Big spring, mirror of heaven, 10,000 gallons a minute shoot up through sand, clear, pure, 45 degrees all year long. Nothing we can do will earn it. The largest spring on the lake or the world, no one's sure we are made of this. The blue pools 40 feet deep, lake trout and rainbows below us look to be a yard long, swimming above the bottom. Moss on cedars at the edge muffles the noise our children try to make. And then a really tiny little poem that's got a couple sentences in prose and then a couple lines in verse about over here on this part of the state. You guys might know what the Kingston Plains is? Yes, no? John does. Some of you do? Okay, good, good. Most of the places I go, people do not, as you might imagine. Probably, I'm not sure it's my favorite place on the planet or in the state, but it's pretty close. I hate it when people do this at readings and I didn't mark the poem. But the Kingston Plains is 12 square miles of nothing but stumps that were carbonized by an old fire. Oh, I know. I was looking in the wrong book, maybe. No? Oh, yes, I was. In around 1880, and it was a very hot fire. They cut those trees really quick to rebuild Chicago after the Chicago fire. And they just took the slash and just left it there, and the tops, they just left it there. They did nothing with them. It's only a couple miles from Lake Superior, so the breezes would come up from Superior, and when it burned really hot. And as I say in this little piece, it burned off the top foot of organic matter. So nothing grew there. Potato chip lichen, you know, the ones that goes crunch, crunch, crunch when you walk over it. The first time Christina and I went there was probably the mid-1980s, and there was still nothing but those stumps and the potato chip lichen. Interestingly enough, since the 40 years since I started going to this place, it has slowly built up soil. So there are some aspens. They look kind of scraggly and things beginning to come up. There are some other kinds of bushy kinds of plants, and thank God there are blueberries, lots of blueberries, which means there are lots of bear too. But so yeah, I took my students here too. I'll tell you a story in a minute. So here's this tiny little poem about the Kingston Plains and also about the grace from the natural world. Kingston Plains, the ghost forest. Gray stumps of white pine were almost charred into immortality by a fire so hot it burned off all the organic matter in the top several inches of soil. Little but lichen grew here for 130 years, and now, finally, a clump of small, ripe blueberries. So I took these students there, and they're mostly pretty young, mostly 19, 20. And there was one young woman who was very uncomfortable at first. She's become a real, tough woman in the woods now. But she was pretty uncomfortable. And I felt a real victory when I found out that she'd gone into the forest, and instead of the ghost forest, instead of writing something, she just laid down in the grasses and slept. And then, of course, when we were leaving, she didn't appear. And blueberries, bears, these famous UP wolves, and I'm thinking, okay, I just lost a student from the suburbs, but we found her. She woke up finally. But that wasn't the last time I was at the Kingston Plains, and Steve and I are probably going to go there tomorrow, depending on what the weather's like. Here's a biostation poem, even on the set list, without changing things. You're not supposed to be out alone in small boats in the dark, but I did it all the time. Now that none of us work there anymore, I can admit that I did it all the time. You did too. And there were a couple of cabins that would do fireworks on July 4th. So I'd stay for the fireworks, drink a couple of beers, and then paddle back by myself. And here's this view of paddling back. Independent. Beverly, there's also a line of French poetry in here from Apollinaire's song for the poorly loved. And it's in there only because I wanted something exotic. A connection with Apollinaire has nothing to do with the poem, but I get to say at least two words in French. So, Independence Day after midnight. Back when I could, I paddled my canoe down a dark lake at midnight after fireworks on Independence Day, then rounded the head of the bay and saw the Milky Way, Voie lactée, oh luminous sister, reach down to my cabin in a river of light. And that made me think of another poem that I'd written years before, which a couple people, including a friend at the biological station. For those of you who don't know, by the way, I taught at the biological station for a dozen years, a class called Environmental Writing in Great Lakes Literature. U of M's biological station is about 20 miles south of the bridge. University owns 10,000 acres there, where they've basically just been watching the forestry go for 100 years, more than 100 years now. Friends have set this to music with varying degrees of success, but it's always feels an honor to have friends do it. So here's just this little fragment. It's from a poem called Conditions, where each section begins with a conditional clause. Conditions. If the world becomes so bright we can't see the stars, will they become stories like mythical wars or old gods? Or will we, all of us, the whole world, plan festivals, say 6 hours long, on the 6th new moon of each bright year, when we turn off all our lights, every single bulb, and dance quietly beneath temporary stars? Poems about the stars. You got to do that too, you know. This one I got to do just because I like it. Luna moths among the ferns. Luna moths. One of the 4 or 5 I've seen in Michigan was actually on the Ranger, the El Royal Ranger coming back, and it was on the side of the boat as we left the island, and all the way across the 60 miles across the lake, it just sort of clung to the side of the boat, which was very cool. Luna, big green moths, butterflies, moths. Luna moths among the ferns. Luna moths as large as hands mate in our banana ferns. Green on green, almost disappearing. Their tails, the length of pencils, curl as delicate as rice paper. At night, the female rises into black oaks, where she sets her eggs gently in the soft place where leaf meets twig. The male takes off toward the light, full moon, blue moon, supermoon, higher and higher until he dies on the wing, then drifts down in late summer breezes to decorate another yard miles from here. Old man reading. When the old man dozes off while reading, words keep appearing in his half-dream. He invents new characters and wild, improbable plot twists. He turns unreal pages. And one more of these newer poems. It's going to be a century before you guys get pawpaws up here. But the pawpaw tree has moved into southern Michigan pretty strongly, and it's kind of cool, and pawpaws are fun, and we get to eat them, even though they look ugly. They're around my neighborhood now. I think the I-94 line is right about the northern extent of the pawpaws, but they're going to keep moving as the climate warms. Stealing the fruit of our neighbor's pawpaw for my daughter. The large brown pawpaw seeds evolved perhaps to be carried in the guts of our megafauna, our mammoths and mastodons, our giant sloths, all long gone. So we do our duty for biodiversity when we pick the fruit fallen on the sidewalk close to the park just before the ants get to it. We're not really stealing, are we? At home, we split it down the middle like a hot dog bun, dig out the seeds, then use a spoon to scoop the spongy meat of the fruit, soft and tropical, our Michigan banana, mango custard. We save the smooth brown seeds. We plan to keep them over winter. We plant them below our oaks to give pawpaw to our neighbors. Let me read a few poems from this new book, from this latest book, to end on. 3 or 4 maybe, all short. Skateboard park on the west side of Ann Arbor that some of you know, and I admit we were a little bit skeptical when they put it in, but it's just great. It's filled with all these incredibly beautiful young people and they're on skateboards. And I noticed that as you get away from the park, you don't hear the noise. you just look over and you see these young people floating through air. And it's great, you know. So, of course, I had to turn them into angels. The skateboard park, seen from afar. Down past empty baseball diamonds, the skateboarders glide silently through air, their gossamer wings invisible. Their wheels grinding against the ramp, the crack of the boards when they pop upward into flight. It has all dissipated in the space between us. Even their mistakes are angelic. I come from very conservative religious people in the Amish Mennonite tradition, which is an Anabaptist tradition. You know, if you're an infant, you don't get immediately baptized. You can't get baptized until you're the age of consent, like a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. Oh yeah, and Steve and I were driving up here. We saw the first time I'd seen an Amish buggy in the UP, which is like, wow, that's cool. So this is called infant baptism. When she was 6 weeks old, her mother exhausted, sleeping, and me dumb and clumsy in my fathering, I wrapped her and took her out one late December night in a snowstorm to see a snowy owl perch in a tree like a gigantic, puffy, pure white songbird peering down on us, yellow-eyed, frightened or curious, or vaguely wondering if my daughter might be food when I lifted her toward him. See, snow fell on her face, and she didn't cry. I just had to put this in a sort of comment that came up this afternoon when I was talking. Poems, there are lots of poems that you read and you don't know what the hell's going on, and that's okay. You know, you can try to figure them out or you cannot try to figure them out. It's okay. But when you write them and you don't know what's going on, that can be a different feeling. Although, in my old age, it's ended up being a pretty good feeling. It's like, I don't know what this poem's about. So I stuck up, there's the title on here, Through the Friendly Silence of the Moon. Forgive me, but it comes from Latin, Per amica silentia lunae. It's in Virgil, and it describes that moment when the Greek ships have gone to hide and the Trojans have taken the horse in, and the ships come back through the friendly silence of the moon. It was that. I met a woman, an Arabic woman who she told me her name meant that color of the moon on water. And of course I couldn't pronounce her name, embarrassingly. Through the friendly silence of the moon. I know that color. Moonlight reflecting off water. White, but not white. Water darker at the light. We have no word for it. I heard there's a woman's name that is that word, but northern tongues can never seem to sound it right. And then there is the ancient writer who sailed his ships through the friendly silence of the moon. I've heard that sound that is not sound, and I've seen the primrose that blossoms in the night. Again, I like it. I have to go by a bunch of Isle Royale poems here, but I've written a couple sequences about Isle Royale where I've luckily had twice been artist in residence there, which is great. But let me get toward the end. Let me say two more poems. The last two in this book. Some of you will remember Tom Monahan, the founder of Domino's, and how he tried to take over so much of Michigan for a very conservative Catholic outlook on things. Washtenaw County was the epicenter of his efforts. And one of the things he did was build a really beautiful convent out northeast of town. And these are very conservative nuns. I don't quite know what they do. I thought they were teachers, but reading his poem recently, someone said, no, they're not teachers, they're contemplatives. So who knows? But they always they never take their habits off. So there's none of these hip nuns in blue jeans. It's not that. They wear their snow white habits all the time. And they go out and they do things like jog and play soccer. Or they all go on long walks together with all these, and they tend to be a fairly young group of nuns, and these long walks. So Steve and I were out one day, and I counted them, and Steve can verify that I did count the nuns. 23 nuns on Warren Road. 23 nuns, all in white, walk with vigor down Warren Road on a muggy August afternoon. They dodge or step over branches, even trees lying in the road, downed by the storm that blew through late last night. Dark puddles in ditches or hidden by the bushes that grow next to Warren Road reflect 23 pure white habits marching past with purpose. I don't know if they've given themselves to unimaginable lives of service or contemplation, or have simply found refuge from bad families. They neither talk nor laugh, but all smile, all 23 nuns, all in white, smile when I slow to a crawl on Warren Road, careful not to splash the puddles onto their pure white habits. And they wave the gentle country wave, one hand raised in slow motion, only a quick recognition of my moment in their lives. They don't break stride. And here's a poem to end on. It's called Botanists in Love, and it's dedicated to some of our friends, Alison Vardy and Shane Lishawa. I started my work at the biological station in 2006, and I went on this canoe trip that is described here with Alison and Shane, telling them I would write about it. Well, it took me 18 years to write about it. Then it took me a couple years to publish in a magazine, and it took me a couple more years to publish it in a book, but I finally published it. And some of their attitudes have changed since then. Shane says he's embarrassed by one of the things I have him say, but he shouldn't be. And the poem's called Botanists in Love. God, I love a swamp, and that even after the mosquitoes hit. Sagittaria latifolia, she says, and he tries Myrica gale. They shout their binomials, besting each other, flirting, maybe showing off just a little for the old guy stuck in the middle. When he asks for English, arrowhead, sweet gale, they say common names are for common people. But he's a common man, caught between botanists in love, third person in a canoe where there are things happening more important than paddling. Just a couple of years before jobs and children and fatigue, they hit swamp water and lift out over mats of yellow pond lilies, Nuphar variegata, until all three are flying through reeds and bushes, high on love and botany. Thank you, guys. And if you have questions, I will be happy to answer them. If you want books, buy them from my buddies in the back so they can justify their existence. And what a pleasure it has been to be in Marquette again. So take care.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, there's no silly question, someone said.
You had the word common in either your penultimate or your last comment.
Yeah.
I was harkening back to the beginning when you were talking about birds. What makes them get a common grackle? Is that the thing?
Common grackle is actually its common name. I don't know its scientific name, but they're good one. Common grackles are fairly common, although some of the birds who are called common this or common that are not common. So those names are, well, I love those names, and I've written a fair amount about the names we stick on things in the natural world, and it's pretty interesting. Goldfinches used to be called wild canaries. I have a poem which I used this afternoon about the Canada jay, which you can see in the UP, if you're lucky. I've seen them once at Hulbert Bog over by Newberry and once on Isle Royal. It's pretty common north of Superior and pretty common high in the Rockies. So it's the gray jay, the whiskey jack, camp robber, Parasaurus canadensis, and there's a couple more that I'm not thinking of the top of my head. So all these names we give to them. The scientific names are put on there so we can reduce the confusion, and that has just been redone by the American Ornithological Society. So the names are more consistent, and they're consistent now with us and Europe and South America and Africa, so the names are always trying to be consistent. But what makes a bird common? Well, if you go small c common, we see a lot of it, House sparrows, they're common. They're kind of cool in their own common way, but yeah. No, I mean, I think for bird watchers, certainly not for ornithologists, but not for bird watchers either. I don't think it's, I got to stay here or they're not going to be able to hear me on the TV. I don't think it's derogatory. There are bird watchers who always want to see the new thing, and they'll just go, that's so common. That's not special. And most of us who've spent a few decades looking at the birds don't have that attitude, but yeah, it's there. Jenny?
Do you have a favorite bird poem?
Do I have a favorite? Well, that one about my daughter's holding my daughter up to the snowy owl. That's up there. A favorite bird poem not by me?
Yeah.
Okay, favorite bird poem not by me. Ones I do, but I'm blanking right now. There are a lot of really great bird poems, and there always have been. Birds are a thing in the natural world that lend themselves to metaphor. They sing, they fly, they disappear. Many of them disappear for months at a time, and for thousands of years we didn't know where they went. So they lend themselves to a metaphoric understanding. So there are a lot of them. And they go way back. There's a bunch of them in the Greek canon, for instance, that are bird poems. There's all kinds of things in Homer where things get compared to birds and go on. There's those famous poems of the Romantic poets, that Shelley's Ode to a Skylark. Hail to thee, blithe spirit, bird thou never wert. I'm going to speak in a couple of weeks to the Washtenaw County Audubon Society, now the Bird and Nature Association. I'm going to start with that because a guy I know down there, a lot of bird watchers were English majors too. They're either, biology majors or English majors. Go figure. Who said, hail to thee, blithe spirit, bird, thou always wert. So, he's not going to accept the metaphor. It's got to be a real bird. What's that one by Hardy about the thrush, which is basically a poem about death, but it's a poem about a thrush. What's the title? Thrush is in the title. Is it just thrush? Yeah. But you look that up by Thomas Hardy, who wrote all his great poems after his wife died, and he never recovered from that. But it's this wonderful poem about a thrush singing, and an English thrush, not our thrushes. But yeah, that one actually might be one of my favorites, and I should have it memorized. I think at one time I did have it memorized, but like my French vocabulary, these things tend to be disappearing. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Sure. Oh, that was you, Marty.
No, I was just asking if there's any other questions.
Well, in that, part of the technological compilation that you were talking about, naming everything and so on, did they move away from human being names for birds?
Well, we're moving away because,
There is a movement away from.
yeah, there is. Partly because a lot of those 19th century names that were put on there were by people who were enslavers, that's the worst thing. I mean, that's why we don't call Audubon anymore, because he owned 9 people in his life. Although, what do? You can't deny those paintings. They're so beautiful. But but a lot of these names were moving away from, and also, even if it was somebody who wasn't nefarious, I've got a poem about the Swainson's thrush, which you see a lot on Isle Royal, and, Swainson. I haven't heard anything bad about Swainson. I think he was a preacher or something. But there might be something bad, and they might change the name of the Swainson's thrush. And then what are they going to change it to? I mean, they're changing those names to get away from that connotations, but also because they're not real helpful. There's you could put a name on a Swainson's thrush that would be more helpful than Mr. Swainson, even if he was an estimable man. What would it be? Yellow eye-ringed thrush, something like that, where the name could actually reflect. And there are already names like that, a bunch of names, even though they get confusing. Like a red-headed woodpecker has a red head. Can't miss it. A red-bellied woodpecker, not so much. That belly's not so red. They're trying hard to get it. And they have big meetings about it. I've been to one of them once with the American Ornithological Society. And these people can get really worked up about things, which is kind of cool. People getting angry about bird names, which is fun, I think. John?
How often do you write a poem that you don't edit?
I have done that. None is coming immediately to mind. Yeah, they all end up changing. And the nice thing about writing poems is it's not like a book that goes out there and, 25,000 people spend real money on it. I mean, you hope you're going to sell 1,000 copies, and you can reprint poems. There's not this new book, because that was written after, but I put together All the Time You Want, selected poems 1977 to 2017. So I reprinted poems, some that go back to 1977, when I was 25 years old. And I revised them before I put them in here. And if somebody's going to pick that out, well, that means they got a lot of time on their hands, or they're really trying for a certain kind of tenure, which is probably not available anymore. And I think it sounds better. And William Butler Yeats revised things on his deathbed that he wrote when he was 19. So you can change poems. It's part of the convention of the art. Some people don't like it when you do, but yeah, I change everything. Now, if I ever written a poem, I don't think I ever have. I tell you a story about that. There was a wonderful African-American poet named James Emanuel who left the United States in the 60s and went to live in the south of France. And I met him there and heard him read once. And he is best known, where you can still find his poem, is a little poem called Panther Man, about the Black Panthers. That big, on one page. James Emanuel worked for years and years and years on a long 78-page poem about African-American history. Busted his butt trying to do this poem. If you could find it now, you'd have to go to a very large library with an arcane poetry collection. His poem, Panther Man, he sat down one day and wrote it in 19 minutes and never changed a word. So this process, well, Jonathan can tell you, this process is very unfair. You really don't know what's going to happen or when it's going to happen. But I don't know. I mean, I do have lots of poems that I haven't done anything with that have not been revised yet. Some of them 30, 40 years old. But I don't know there's anything I've ever put in a book or even in a magazine that has not been revised. That probably says something about me. Little too anal to let those things happen. Yeah, I don't know. All right. Thank you, guys. And for the first time since I crossed the bridge, I worked up a sweat.